A father is about to lose a son is about to lose everything he has been quietly stealing, and nobody in this house is ready for what happens when the truth finally lands on the dinner table. If you have been following the Mackay's family drama, today's episode is the one where pride, family loyalty, and old secrets finally collide, and by the end of it you will understand why fans have been saying this is one of the messiest weeks in the whole season. Let's start where the episode starts, with the ancestors. In Zulu households, when things start going wrong, the first place people look is not the bank account or the business ledger, it's the spiritual side of the family. That's exactly where we find ourselves at the top of this episode. There's a visit to a traditional healer, and the message that comes back is heavy. The ancestors are unsettled, and they are asking for attention from the family before things get worse. For viewers who know how these shows work, this is never just a side moment. It's a signal. Whenever a Sangoma or Inyanga tells a family that the ancestors want something, it usually means the writers are setting up a bigger reveal later in the season, and this episode uses that warning as the emotional backdrop for everything that follows. While that spiritual tension is sitting in the background, the real fireworks are happening inside the family business. This is where the episode really picks up speed. There has been a slow-burning suspicion building for weeks that someone inside the company has been playing both sides, and today it finally comes out into the open. The confrontation is not calm. It's raised voices, wounded pride, and two grown men refusing to back down in front of the rest of the family. One of them has clearly been caught doing something he should not have been doing, and instead of owning up quietly, he tries to defend himself, which only makes things worse. Watching two people who used to trust each other completely turn into enemies over money and documents is honestly one of the more uncomfortable scenes this season, because you can tell the writers wanted us to feel the weight of a family business being torn apart from the inside. Then we get to Mlaba, and if you've been rooting for him at any point this season, today might test that. Mlaba has been sitting on a reputation problem for a while now. People around him have started noticing that his business decisions are not adding up, and there are quiet conversations happening about him behind his back. Even people who are usually neutral in this family are starting to say his character is slipping. There's a suggestion in this episode that his personal relationships are suffering too, with rumors swirling about tension in his marriage, and on top of that, there's talk that someone close to him is even considering new job opportunities, which tells you how unstable his home life has become. All of this piles on top of the business drama to paint a picture of a man who is losing control of every part of his life at the same time. The document storyline is really the spine of this episode, so let's slow down and go through it properly. It turns out that important paperwork belonging to the family logistics business has been sitting somewhere it should never have been, tucked away in a personal home instead of where it belongs. When this comes out, it is treated as a serious betrayal, not just a paperwork mix-up. Family members start asking how long this has been going on and who else might have known. There's a flashback-style explanation of how one relative struggled to get those documents released from another family member, which led to a private conversation with an in-law. That conversation is interesting because it reveals something about character rather than just plot. The in-law points out that this particular family member used to be close with the person now causing all the trouble, and that he has always been someone who can be talked into things fairly easily. Not everyone agrees with that read though, and one family member pushes back, arguing that he is not as easily influenced as people think. He is simply loyal to a fault, and there is a difference between being manipulated and being protective of people you love. That protectiveness becomes the emotional center of a quieter, more personal scene later in the episode. A young man in the family reaches a breaking point after watching decisions being made around him instead of with him. He feels like his own voice does not matter in his own household, and instead of talking it out, he takes matters into his own hands. He goes looking through his father's things, hoping to find answers about what has really been going on with the family paperwork. It's a tense scene, filmed the way these shows usually film someone snooping where they should not be, quiet footsteps, a slightly too loud creak, the constant fear of getting caught. And of course, because this is a soap opera, he almost does get caught, which raises the stakes for whatever comes next in this particular storyline. In between all of this heavier drama, the show gives us a breather with a subplot that feels almost comic relief by comparison, but it still ties back into the same theme of family suspicion and spiritual unease. Someone in the family keeps running into people who claim to have spoken to a traditional healer, and every single one of them comes back with the same warning: the ancestors are not happy, and people close to this family are being targeted or used by outside forces. It becomes almost a running joke among some of the characters, the constant repetition of "the ancestors want this" and "people are using you," but underneath the humor there's a real question the show is asking, which is whether this family is dealing with actual supernatural trouble or whether people are using tradition as an excuse to explain away very human problems like greed and jealousy. There's also a returning face this episode, someone who had stepped back from the main storyline for a while and is now back in the picture, seemingly trying to rebuild an image that took a hit on social media. It's a small moment in the grand scheme of the episode, but it hints that this character's arc is not finished, and there's likely more coming from that direction in future episodes. Now let's get into the part of the episode that fans are going to be talking about the most, the fallout from a strained relationship between an older married couple in the family. One of the wives has clearly had enough of watching her husband bend to his father's every decision without ever standing up for her or for himself. She confronts him directly, telling him flat out that he never defends her, that he always does whatever his father says, and that he does not seem to have a voice or a backbone of his own. It's a brutal thing to say to your own husband, but it lands because we have watched this exact pattern play out over several episodes now. He is a grown man who still can't operate outside his father's shadow, and his wife is done pretending that is acceptable. This scene alone tells you the writers are building toward a bigger reckoning for this couple, possibly even a separation storyline if things do not change soon. Meanwhile, there's a subplot involving stolen money that connects several characters who have history with each other. It turns out one relative may have taken money that was not his to take, and while some family members are willing to let it slide because they've been close in the past, others are not so forgiving, especially a particular cousin who is known for holding on to his pride. What's interesting is that this pride actually gets challenged later in the episode when he is pushed to apologize for something he did. He resists at first, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of humbling himself, but eventually gives in, at least partially, which shows a small crack in his usual stubbornness. Still, he makes it clear through his body language and tone that he believes he is entitled to a share of the family business simply because he was there when it was being built, and in his mind, that entitlement excuses what he did. That attitude sets up one of the most dramatic confrontations of the entire episode. An older family patriarch, clearly fed up with excuses, delivers a devastating ultimatum. He tells the young man in question that an apology, even if given, does not erase what happened, and that he is permanently finished at the company. No second chances, no quiet reinstatement down the line, just a flat statement that trust has been broken beyond repair. He goes further, promising that he will personally make sure the matter is legally closed and reported properly, which suggests this is not just an internal family punishment, this could have real consequences outside the household as well. This is where another son gets pulled into the mess, someone who up until this point has largely stayed out of the business politics. His father takes the firing personally, framing it almost as an insult directed at him rather than a fair consequence for wrongdoing. In his frustration, the father makes an impulsive decision that costs him one of the more level-headed, reasonable people in his corner. It is a classic soap opera domino effect, one bad decision under pressure knocking over relationships that had nothing to do with the original mistake. By the middle of the episode, we get a scene that many viewers will find satisfying if they have been frustrated with a certain character's cowardice all season. The young man at the center of the business scandal finally goes to try and make things right with the relative he wronged, only to discover that the truth has already come out to everyone who matters, including his own wife. She does not hold back, telling him directly how disappointed she is in him, and there's a quiet dignity in how she delivers it, no screaming, just calm disappointment, which somehow feels heavier than if she had yelled. He tries to justify his situation by pointing out that he no longer works for the company anyway, as if that somehow softens what he did, but nobody in the room is buying it. His parents get pulled into the aftermath too, and here the show gives us a small twist. The father figure in this storyline is stubborn in his own way, but not always in the direction you'd expect. Instead of accepting the firing as final, he decides that since this is technically a family business and not something one person can unilaterally control, his son should not be locked out of it so easily. This leads to a genuinely tense scene where he drives his son back to the office to confront the man who fired him, demanding an explanation. The reaction from the people already in that office is a mix of shock and disbelief, because everyone assumed this matter was settled. The son at the center of it all, true to form, tries to avoid taking responsibility for why he was actually fired in the first place, choosing silence over honesty even when directly questioned. That silence, that refusal to admit what he actually did, becomes almost more frustrating to watch than the original theft itself. The other side of the family stands firm on the idea that blood relatives cannot simply fire each other from a business that belongs to everyone, and they push to have the decision reversed. But the man who made the firing decision is not backing down either, and in a moment that raises the temperature of the whole episode, he actually calls security to have them removed from the premises. It's a shocking visual for a family drama, watching relatives escorted out of a building they helped build, and it tells you exactly how far this rift has gone. There is no polite compromise left on the table at this point, only two sides digging in. Once everyone is back at home, there's a quieter, sadder scene where the father tries to explain his reasoning to his wife, essentially saying that keeping their son fired is, in his mind, actually protecting the family from further damage, even if it looks harsh from the outside. He reveals that part of his decision comes from knowing his son never actually stopped his risky behavior, even after being caught once before and warned to stop. That detail matters a lot, because it reframes the firing not as an overreaction, but as a response to repeated, ongoing dishonesty that the family had already tried to handle quietly once and failed. The episode closes on a genuinely painful family scene involving a younger member of the household who has been caught in the middle of all this adult conflict without asking for any of it. He becomes an emotional casualty of his father's anger, essentially punished for things that were never his fault, and the final moments show him being forced out of the home entirely. It's a gut-punch ending, made worse by the fact that he seems completely unaware of why any of this is happening to him, caught in a storm created entirely by the adults around him. So where does this leave us heading into the next episode? The business rift between these two branches of the family is far from resolved, the marriage tension we saw is likely to escalate rather than cool down, and there's now a completely innocent young person paying the price for conflicts he had no part in creating. Add to that the ongoing warnings from the ancestors that opened this episode, and it's hard not to feel like the show is building towards something even bigger, whether that's a spiritual reckoning, a legal one, or simply the final collapse of whatever trust was left holding this family together. If you want to stay updated on where this storyline goes next, make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, because based on how this episode ended, the next one is not going to slow down.